One of the main characters in this, an unsavory person, is Corey Lewandowski, who we know has been connected with Kristi Noem, both of them showing infidelity from their marriages. But Corey Lewandowski's had a lot of influence on the people around the president, and he's very close friends with Jeff Landry. And there are others, and so there's been a lot of background and backroom manipulation. But when I spoke with the president, he said, look, you're fantastic. And he just couldn't believe that I hadn't spoken with him and apparently had no knowledge that I was being blocked in connecting with him on.
Thank you for joining us once again on the State of Freedom.
The State of Freedom is a listener-supported podcast. We are committed to pursuing the truth about policymaking, regulatory actions, and political maneuvers in Louisiana and at the national level that stand to impact your freedoms.
Please support the State of Freedom by becoming a monthly supporter or member of the Warrior Circle, or by advertising your business, your nonprofit, or your event with us. Go to freedomstate.us. We are bypassing the mainstream media cartel and the establishment political parties in Louisiana and coming directly to you, spreading the uncensored voice of freedom across Louisiana and beyond. I went to Red Zeppelin yesterday with my second oldest son, Eli, and I got this large veggie pizza, which is the best in Baton Rouge. Red Zeppelin is the best kept secret, but because of us, it's really not a secret anymore. Anybody who has not been to Red Zeppelin on Perkins Road in Baton Rouge, you're truly missing out. The best environment, the best service, and the best pizza in the state of Louisiana. Go to Red Zeppelin today. Tell them the State of Freedom sent you.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the State of Freedom, where we are grounded in faith in the Constitution, and we are committed to giving voice to truth, living with courage, and taking action. We are recording this on Monday, April 27th, but it's airing on Wednesday, April 29th at 8 a.m. Central. I'm Danielle Walker, and I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, the less caffeinated than usual, but caffeinated enough, watchdog-in-chief of Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, Chris Alexander. And we are coming to you on Voice of the People USA TV and radio network on Rumble, X, YouTube, and Facebook. Please give us a thumbs up, give us a like, share this episode with your friends. You're definitely going to want to share this episode with your friends because this is an election exclusive. And we have info here that's you're not going to find anywhere else. Know that you can always catch us later, as always, on our audio-only podcast platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcast. As I said, today is all about the upcoming election. We have a power-packed episode for you. We've got three great guests, Dr. John Fleming, who is a candidate for U.S. Senate, Austin Magee, who's candidate for U.S. Congress, District 5, and Monique Appeaning, who's candidate for U.S. Congress in District 6. They're all coming on, and we are also going to break down for you our recommendations on the proposed constitutional amendments on the ballots. So this may be a little bit longer episode than usual, but this is all information you're going to be wanting to know about. Well, let me welcome to the show Dr. John Fleming. Let me bring him on here and give him a nice introduction. Welcome to the show, Dr. Fleming.
Good morning, Danielle.
Good morning. As everyone knows, he's our state treasurer, and as I just mentioned, he's also candidate for U.S. Senate, looking to unseat Bill Cassidy. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with him, he's a physician, an entrepreneur, a businessman, and a military veteran. He's also a former congressman from the 4th District of Louisiana. He served 4 terms in Congress from 2009 to 2017. And while he was in Congress, he was one of the founders of the House Freedom Caucus. After leaving Congress, he was appointed to 3 different positions in the Trump administration. First, he served from 2017 to 2019 as Deputy Assistant Secretary at Health and Human Services. Then he was appointed and Senate confirmed in 2019 as Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Economic Development. And in 2020, he was detailed to the West Wing of the White House and served as the Deputy Chief of Staff to President Trump. And there's much more than that, much more. But all that to say, Dr. Fleming has a strong conservative record, and we will be getting into more of that shortly. But let me read the scripture of the day first. It is 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 8 through 11, and it says, "Be well balanced and always alert, because your enemy, the devil, roams around incessantly like a roaring lion looking for its prey to devour. Take a decisive stand against him and resist his every attack with strong, vigorous faith. For you know that your believing brothers and sisters around the world are experiencing the same kinds of troubles you endure. And then, after your brief suffering, the God of all loving grace, who has called you to share in his eternal glory in Christ, will personally and powerfully restore you and make you stronger than ever. Yes, he will set you firmly in place and build you up. And he has all the power needed to do this forever. Amen." And this is a word of encouragement for me this morning for renewed vigilance. I don't know what kind of battles you've been facing, but for Chris and me, we're halfway through the legislative session, and it could be exhausting, late nights, early mornings, seemingly never-ending battles. And for Treasurer Fleming, for Treasurer Fleming and our other guest today, it has been a long slog to get to this place, almost to the first primary election. It can be easy to get tired and let our guard down, but the Lord's reminding us this morning to be alert and to take our stand against the devil. We're instructed to resist him with our strong, vigorous faith, and James 4:7 tells us that if we resist the devil, he will flee from us. So it's our resistance, our strong, determined stance against evil and for what is right that will cause the enemy to flee. And if we do this, the Lord promises that he will restore us, he will refresh us, he will make us stronger than ever, and he's more than able to do it.
Yep. And it's not dependent upon circumstances, Danielle,
Right.
not dependent upon circumstances. So resist and he will, in fact, flee. Because there's always this tendency to become sort of paralyzed and sort of, oh God, look what's coming now, this, that, and the other. And we just have to remember to keep our eyes on Christ, move forward. And, he's got the results, as John Adams says. Our responsibility is to act on principle and let God handle the results. And that's exactly what he's doing here. Speaking of attacks, Dr. Fleming, I wanted to give you an opportunity to address a couple. I mean, we're a week or so away. Well, actually, a week or so away from early voting, just a matter of days in the U.S. Senate race. And then, of course, the primary election is on the 16th. And in typical political fashion, you're getting hit with a couple of attacks that just seem to be really, really groundless and baseless. You have already addressed those attacks. I want to take up one first on illegal immigration and the idea that you somehow support illegal immigration. What is your response to that, and how is the campaign responding to this attack, and who's it coming from?
Treasurer Fleming, we don't have any audio from you.
Well, I saw this attack, Danielle. It was coming across, texted to me, I think, on Dr. Fleming supposedly being for illegal immigration. Yeah, I think he's coming back in now.
Yeah, it was going to my phone for some reason. That's the reason.
Oh, no problem.
Yes, okay. All right.
Did you get the question?
That's all right. No, I got the question.
Yeah.
What my response is this, Chris and Danielle. Early on in this election cycle, this race, someone asked me, well, look, you have such a clean record. Your background is spick and span. Your votes have been consistently conservative. What can they hit you on? And my response was, they can make stuff up. And that's exactly what's happened. So on this immigration thing, 18 years ago, I was giving my first speech. I was kind of nervous, and I was talking about migrant workers for farmers. And I slipped up and said more illegal immigrants when I meant more migrant workers for farmers. I quickly corrected myself. And of course, that has been on YouTube for 18 years. So it's been tried several times where somebody throws that up. And in the case of Julia Letlow's campaign, which is run by Jeff Landry, our governor, they simply edited out my correction. And then they go on to say that I actually want more illegal immigrants, which is not true. So it's a very dishonest ad. And they've put out some other ads that are sort of similar or somewhat related to that, all of them being, in one case, me driving a bus I've never driven a bus before. It's all ridiculous.
AI generated. AI
AI
generated.
generated, yes. So my voting record on border security and on anti-illegal immigration is pristine, 96% by Numbers USA. I also worked on the border wall when I was a deputy chief of staff in the White House. I worked on Kushner's team where we got with the engineers. So I have by far the best record in this race on that. Nobody can come close. Cassidy's at 50% on that. Letlow at 5%. So again, we have to answer those attack ads, but they're totally dishonest. And I'm very disappointed that Jeff Landry, our governor, and Julia Letlow together are putting out these dishonest ads. You know, people in Louisiana are smarter than that. They really are.
And Dr. Fleming, before you go on, could you just address why you say that Jeff Landry's behind it?
Because, and we can get into this more if you like, but just to say briefly, he selected her to run in this race well over 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, as a placeholder for him. When he finishes being governor, he wants to appoint her to be head of a college, which he's applied for twice, LSU and University of Louisiana Monroe. And so her ultimate goal is not to be in the Senate. Hers is to run a university because she comes from that background. She's applied twice and been eliminated. And what he wants to do is at the right time, at the appointed time, to appoint her to be a president or chancellor of one of the universities. Then he would self-appoint. He would appoint himself to be a U.S. senator, and then he could be easily reelected after that. So this is pure election interference, manipulation, and backroom deals. He arranged to put a moat around the White House where I couldn't get through. I couldn't talk to the president. The president later asked me why I didn't come to him, and I had to tell him the truth, and that is that people around him blocked my access.
Yeah. And John, you know, there have been other issues. We've had a couple of guests on our show who have pretty strong connections into the White House who've said essentially the same thing, not on your issue, but on other issues, that the president is being blocked from getting full and accurate information on a broad range of issues, not just as far as candidates for office, but on issues that are of concern to the American citizens. And, you know, you've worked in the White House, and so it's certainly not inconceivable to you that that sort of impediment to open communication with the president could be built up around him.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah, one of the main characters in this, an unsavory person, is Corey Lewandowski, who we know has been connected with Kristi Noem, both of them showing infidelity from their marriages. But Corey Lewandowski's had a lot of influence on the people around the president, and he's very close friends with Jeff Landry. And there are others. And so there's been a lot of background and backroom manipulation. But when I spoke with the president, he said, look, you're fantastic. He just couldn't believe that I hadn't spoken with him and apparently had no knowledge that I was being blocked in connecting with him on this.
Yeah. And the thing that's troubling about this, John, is that it's as though they don't want a real airing of the issues. They don't want open debate. They don't want free communication and dialogue so that the citizens of this state can really evaluate candidates. It's as though the only thing they can do is try to shut that down, which is really antithetical to the democratic process. You know, I mean, I'll give you one example. I mean, you've made yourself available, it seems like, numerous times for an open debate on the issues. And it's like they're avoiding facing the and this goes for Cassidy as well, and Letlow. They seem to be avoiding just facing the citizens of Louisiana. There's nothing more inherent in our process than having candidates in an open forum discuss their position on issues, yet they seem to be just habitually avoiding that in your race.
Right. Well, what's happening here is in the case of Julia Letlow, we know how she ended up being a congresswoman, and we know that Jeff Landry had cut a deal with Cleo Fields to help him get elected governor, so he would then flip a congressional district from Republican to Democrat, so a liberal Democrat could go to Congress even though, of course, Jeff is supposed to be a Republican. What this is a small group of Louisiana politicians who bootstrap each other up into influential and high office. And they do it by more or less blindsiding or gaslighting the voters. So the voters don't really know. Look, I voted for Jeff Landry. I admit that. I thought that he was a good conservative guy, thought I knew him, and I found that he's anything but that. He's very liberal. And what he does is only for himself, and he leaves Louisiana behind. And unfortunately, we have way too many politicians who do that. And I'm the only one calling him out on it. But really, it's a prevailing knowledge in Louisiana today that Jeff takes care of Jeff first and his friends second. And Louisiana, well, we'll see.
Yeah.
And on that point, Dr. Fleming, speaking of leaving Louisiana last or with the leftovers, would you address the carbon capture issue? I think that's come up in some of the attacks and just maybe where you stand on it.
Right. The first time I ever really heard about carbon capture with sequestration, that's important. There's nothing wrong with capturing carbon if you want to make a product out of it, or if you want to use it for enhancement of oil recovery, which is to get that last 15% of oil out of an oil well and then restore it again above ground. There's nothing wrong with those. That's been going on for 100 years. But there's something new now, which is costing taxpayers hundreds of billions of dollars, only with the idea of somehow affecting climate change, which we really know that carbon dioxide in the atmosphere does not create climate change. That is not a known or settled science at all. But anyway, this new technology is to drill a deep hole in the ground, really millions of tons of liquefied carbon dioxide, along with the other byproducts from oil and gas processing, which are all toxic and dangerous, putting them in the ground where they can get into your water supply, where they block you from having access to your minerals if you wanted to drill for oil on your land. And the problem with it, the worst problem, is that through a Louisiana law, eminent domain allows a private company, foreign or domestic, to come take your land for that purpose against your will. And the people of Louisiana are really upset about it. So while I was in Congress, I voted for a number of oil and gas bills, traditional energy bills, none of them which contained anything about sequestration other than a pilot study here or accountability there, which I'm all for studies and accountability of anything that anybody has considered doing. But there was nothing to fund or implement carbon sequestration. And by the way, sequestration is not in some container. It's pressing it down deep into the earth where it meets a pore space, which means it goes for hundreds of miles, not hundreds, but tens of miles around you, and it can find its way back up, and it's a toxic gas, which if you breathe it can kill you. It is a dangerous gas. So anyway, there are those who support carbon capture and sequestration who want to attack my credibility, again, like Jeff Landry, who's head of this Magee energy organization, which he created it to push back against those that don't like carbon sequestration. He wants to say that I voted for it, but in fact, there were two bills, both under Obama, that I voted against carbon sequestration. But none of the bills I voted for, which again, all Republicans voted for when I was in the House of Representatives, none of them contained carbon sequestration implementation or funding. And so that, I think, gives an idea to folks. So I'm the only candidate in this race who opposes carbon sequestration. Both Julia Letlow, she is very supportive of it. Her fiance is the chief lobbyist and lawyer for carbon sequestration. So she has a vested financial interest, just like she has a vested financial interest in investing in the stock market with insider information. It appears that she's up on ethics claims about that. And then, of course, Bill Cassidy was one of the architects of carbon capture and sequestration. So clearly, the other two candidates are all for it while I'm totally against it.
Yeah. John, one of the issues about, and you just touched on it, about carbon capture and sequestration is the issue of eminent domain. So not only did you not vote to fund this while you were in Congress, certainly there was no issue of eminent domain whereby private corporations could seize private property in order to lay these pipelines and bury, in geologic storage, permanent geologic storage of CO2. That wasn't even on the horizon there. And yet it appears as though we don't have, regardless of how you feel about carbon capture and sequestration, it doesn't appear that either Letlow or Cassidy have spoken out against that very core principle of private property and drawing the line there at a minimum that you should say, look, someone could say, look, I believe in carbon capture and sequestration for whatever reason, but absolutely do not believe that a private citizen should have to cede his property to a private corporation for their own economic benefit. And yet mum is the word. I mean, they're as silent as church mice on that very important issue as well.
Well, that's one of the keys to the fact that neither Cassidy nor Letlow will show up for our debate or forum. We've been invited to well over 20. Some of them nighttime televised like LPB, KTBS, and others, and they refuse. I have accepted every single one of them. Why? Because they want to run from their records, and this is one of the issues that they're running from. They will not take questions on this at all. I, on the other hand, I look for every opportunity to talk about carbon sequestration, immigration, spending, whatever. I'm happy to talk about it. And they run from these issues. They just want you to see the ads. They have really tens of millions of dollars that they're putting up, mainly in attack ads. Why? Because special interests in Washington are paying for that. Special interests don't give me money because I'm not working for special interest. I'm working for you here in Louisiana.
Dr. Fleming, you touched on this. We kind of grazed across it, but would you just hit it head on? The Trump endorsement of Julia Letlow did leave us all scratching our heads.
Right.
What would you say to the people who say that Letlow must be conservative because Trump endorsed her?
Right. It's clear if you look at our voting records and if you come to my website, FlemingSenateCampaign.com, or my Facebook, Fleming for Louisiana, you will see that Julia Letlow's voting record is arguably more liberal than Bill Cassidy. She spoke highly of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is a very liberal Marxist concept. She considered herself a potential DEI hire at the University of Louisiana, I should say, Monroe. And she voted for DEI when she voted actually to oppose an amendment to the Federal Aviation Administration that would have ripped out DEI from that agency. She actually voted against doing that, and that's been very recent, like 2023, 2024. So she's clearly liberal, but why would she get the Trump endorsement? Well, again, the governor, Jeff Landry, has been working on that for 2, maybe 3 years to get that endorsement for her, knowing that Cassidy was going to have difficulty getting reelected. And but at the same time, Jeff Landry and his cronies around President Trump have blocked my access to President Trump because they knew I would want to talk with him. And she ended up getting the endorsement because President Trump took it upon faith that Jeff Landry would not lie. Well, he was very angry when he found out about all of the problems she has with ethics, on insider trading, on DEI, and all these other things, liberal voting record. And he became very angry at Landry. Well, along the way, I was contacted 5 or 6 times, one time by former Congressman Abraham, to drop out of the race so she would have a clear path to win and I would get some kind of job in Washington. I told every single one of them I wasn't interested. Finally, President Trump himself called me to talk about it. He really didn't push me on it. And I went on to tell him how I was the first congressman who endorsed, not the first, but one of the first congressmen to endorse him in 2016, that I worked for him all 4 years of his administration, that no one has been any more loyal to him than I have. And we went through several things. And finally he says, well, you're fantastic. He said, why didn't you come to me sooner? And I said, "Sir, everyone around you blocked my pathway. I could not talk with you, and they would not talk with me. The fix was already in." So he said, "Look, you're fantastic, and we'll see what happens here." So I have every confidence that, given the opportunity, that I would probably get his endorsement. He did endorse me for my treasurer's position that I have currently. So that gives you an idea of why you have someone who's not a prototypical conservative or MAGA who got the endorsement. I just think that information was withheld from President Trump, and he trusted people that he shouldn't have trusted.
Yeah. And just for the benefit of our listeners, John, DEI, or our viewers, diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's really fundamentally a very sinister concept that teaches, in terms of hiring criteria in academia, in terms of grades, in terms of pedagogy and instruction, that we are to view the country and the Constitution and our founding fathers through the prism of gender and racial victimhood rather than through the golden rule that we're all created in the image of God and that we should all treat each other with the same respect because of our intrinsic dignity and equality before the law and before God. It's a poisonous concept, and I think I would be remiss if I didn't state, Julia Letlow's explanation for this is that, yes, I did support DEI early on, but I quickly learned that it was hijacked for purposes of racial and gender equity. But that's not really true because she was in academia for 12 years when she interviewed for the presidency of, I think, ULM.
Yes.
And it was in that interview in 2020 where she said, we need to not only promote DEI on the campus, we need to set up an entire office on the campus so that we can make
she used the word division, an entire
division.
division.
Yeah. Another layer of academic bureaucracy in order to promote this. So it's really disingenuous to suggest that her turnaround on this occurred early. It really didn't. It just happened to coincide, not coincidentally, with her entry into the U.S. Congress, which I think is really important. So I wanted to point out what DEI is and really how her about face on this issue really does not withstand, or her explanation for it really does not withstand close scrutiny.
And Chris,
well, let me just say this about it to follow up. Chris, she also said before it was hijacked by the left, it was created by the left. It was created by the Marxists, the left-wing nuts, and there's a practical application here. So in order to meet the quotas necessary, what you have to do is pad the test for those taking tests. For instance, if you get upon a 747, you want that pilot to be the very best trained and experienced and high quality you could possibly want. But you have to ask yourself, well, did that person actually get that position because someone passed them on tests that they really didn't pass? If you have to go in and have surgery on your brain, neurosurgery, do you want to know that that doctor actually didn't pass the test, that someone padded their grade on that test? That is what DEI is. It is absolutely like that, and you're going to end up with incompetent people in very important positions if you continue down that pathway.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to that. I recently, last week, met a young teacher. She's been teaching for about 6 years, elementary education, and she was able to spot, now she's a believer, she was able to spot the insidious nature of this in her curriculum basically her very first year of teaching. So I think for someone who wants to run a university, I have a really hard time saying, okay, let me give you a pass that you didn't see what this was, that you didn't have a problem with the division it created. That's really problematic for me.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so what we're saying here is this is not only sinister in concept, there are very real life consequences to promoting this ideology. I mean, that could promote harm to American citizens if people who are in positions of authority and real responsibility are not adequately trained and don't have the skill to do it because of this issues. Anyway, Treasurer Fleming, Danielle, do you have anything to follow up with Dr. Fleming here?
Yeah, well, I think we really covered it, but maybe just mention one more time where people can learn more about you. I'll flash up your website and how people can support your campaign.
Okay, my website is Fleming Senate Campaign. We're very active on social media. I'm the only candidate who will actually answer your questions on social media and elsewhere, and that is Fleming for Louisiana. And of course, we're on X and True Social, all of those. I'm by far the most accessible, the one that's most willing to talk. I travel around the state and have for 17 months now, communicating with people. We have a tremendous grassroots campaign, over 20,000 yard signs and big signs that are placed, 250 volunteers. And we welcome other volunteers as well as we reach the closing days of this primary campaign, which is very important. And as you know, this is a closed primary, so you must be at least Republican or at the very least unaffiliated in order to vote for a Republican such as me in this race.
Yeah. And remember, early voting starts May 2nd, and Election Day for the primary is May 16th. Dr. John Fleming, what a pleasure to have you with us, sir. Keep up the good work, and we will talk soon, sir.
Super. Thank you, Danielle, and thank you, Chris. Have a
You
good
bet.
God bless you, Dr. Fleming. Very best wishes on the election. All right. Well, that was a great conversation with Dr. Fleming. And joining us next is Austin Magee. He is a proud small business owner of Pittman Industrial, which is a welding and mechanical company that works all throughout the state. And he works with his hands, and he's very connected to the land. He's a hunter and a fisherman, someone who loves the sportsman paradise aspect of the state of Louisiana. Let me bring Austin forward. Welcome to the show, Austin.
Absolutely.
Thank y'all for having me. I appreciate it. Happy Monday, everybody.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday to you.
And I neglected to mention right up here that Austin is running for U.S. Congress, the 5th District, I believe. Is that right? Yeah.
That's
and
right.
It's a pretty crowded field.
District. And I'm just pretty crowded field. We got 7 of us. So,
Wow.
But that crowded field is a good thing too, because it's going to split the vote up so much. There's not necessarily any necessarily horrible candidates. So it's going to be so split up with 7 people in the race. We really don't need that many votes to get to a runoff. And it's the perfect opportunity for us to elect a true outsider. You're normally not going to have that. If it's a race between 2 people, people are going to go with the name they've heard the most. And that's a shame, but that's what it's going to come down to. People are going to go in there, and if they're not particularly in that, they're going to have one specific position that somebody's pushing them to go into that polling booth for. And they're going to go in there, and whichever one is not the actual race that they went in to vote for, they're going to look down and just choose the name they've seen or heard the most. Yeah. And that's a shame. That's what's going to happen.
That is often the
we
way
just got
it works.
Such low turnout.
Yeah, it is. Probably going to be, relatively low turnout in this election because there really are not, the biggest race on the ballot is the U.S. Senate race, which is significant and is heating up, but there's no presidential race on the ballot. And, I think you're right. I think it's going to be a relatively low turnout. But I want to start, Austin, with this. When you survey the field in the 5th District, you really are an anomaly because of your background and the fact that you're the farthest thing from a career politician as you could find. And when you look back on the sort of men who ran for office, early in our country's history, you seem to fit that mold much more than the other ones. In other words, people ran for office truly because they wanted to be of service, not because they were seeking self-enrichment, not because they were seeking a paycheck. And that seems to be your motive for doing this. And frankly, I find it very refreshing. So what was it? You have a background in construction and welding and really the sort of blue-collar work that resonates with a lot of Louisiana citizens. So what is it that motivated you to get into this race? Was there a singular inspiration, or is it something you had thought about for a while?
No, I've been frustrated with politics for my whole adult life. I mean, I've never been involved in politics. I've never had any kind of career or involvement other than just voting and paying attention. So, I mean, it's been instilled in me from a young age. I've always been involved in that sense of paying attention and reading and seeing what the stance is on whatever we're voting on, whatever we're doing. I've always been involved as far as that goes, but I've never had any kind of actual political involvement. And I've said it for a while, what this country needs, we need people with calloused hands, heavy bookshelves, and good morals. That's what we need. And I'm just not seeing that. And we're not putting the best of us. Let me put it that way. We're not putting the best of us in office. We're letting the worst people in our societies rule over us and make decisions that concern all of us. And I'm really just tired of seeing it. It's bad on a state level. It's bad on a federal level. I mean, if you look at Louisiana, how bad we are, what we're ranked at as far as convictions for fraud, and that's just convictions, the reality is it could be worse.
Yeah.
We've all got stories or heard from someone who knows somebody that's got a story, and it's like it never came to light. Nothing was ever done about it. Louisiana, we're pretty bad off. I wasn't particularly happy with the job Letlow was doing. I don't particularly like her voting record and the things I saw her doing. And I had already made my mind up I was going to run for this spot before she announced her run for Senate. So
you would have run. So you would have run even if you were running against her.
I would have.
Yeah.
Yes. And I'm not sure if it would have helped me or hurt me for it to be a crowded field like this, for it to be an open seat. I'm really not sure. But I know one thing's for sure. I was sitting on my back porch and I was reading the news and looking at some things. And I can tell you for a fact that it was like somebody spoke to me, like whispered in my ear, like, why can't you do it? And it was a crazy thought to me. Like that was crazy. Like, no, that's not me. I'm not a politician. Like, I don't want that kind of life. I don't want to do that. I don't have, like, I've been on vacations for a week at a time and not locked my doors. Like, it's just not the way I live. It's not the kind of life I want. But it was like after that happened, it was like a burden on my heart, like a conviction, almost like when you come under conviction to get saved, like just a burden that I feel like God put on me, and I couldn't ignore it. And I tried to ignore it. And it was like I went through several, what I call, like Jonah and the whale moments, where I really feel like I reached a point where I had things I was hanging on to, and I'm like, I'm not going to say anything about that. That's crazy. I'm not even going to tell, because when I tell people, when I first came out and told people were surprised, because that's just not me at all. Like, I come home covered in grease and dirt. I'm not a politician at all. So when I told people what I was doing, they're like, you're kidding, you're joking, no way. And I'm like, don't worry, I'm more surprised than you are. I'm more surprised at myself than anybody else is, because this is not something I want to do or planned on doing.
Yeah.
But I'm just, like I said, I'm being obedient to what I feel like was put on my heart. I couldn't take it anymore. Something had to be done. And we need, like we said, we need people that, like our founding fathers were, that just have a zeal and a passion for serving and wanting to do the right thing and see the will of the people done. And that's what I'll do. I'll serve the will of the people.
Yeah.
Because I had things that I felt like were kind of holding me back. Like, well, I got this going on or that going on or whatever. And I feel like God took care of every one of them, like just one at a time, took care of them. It's like, okay, God, you've done it. You've cleared the path. I'm just going to do what I feel like you're pushing me to do here, because what else am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
Exactly.
When you really feel led to do that and you see the obstacles taken away and removed, and there's a reason for everything. I don't believe in coincidences.
Yeah.
There may be some coincidences, but not that many. I'm just doing what I feel led to do, and I'm going to do it for the right reasons. There's a lot of bad things going on across the country and the state.
Yeah.
And
speaking of
Austin,
speaking of the will,
and nobody's going to work harder than me.
Exactly. Speaking of the will of the people, Austin, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry, but the will of the people you touched on.
You're good.
The increasing will of citizens in Louisiana seems to be in strong opposition to this carbon capture and sequestration. Seems to be resonating across the state, the opposition to this. The laying of these pipelines on private property, the permanent burial of CO2 waste, and the use of eminent domain, or the seizure of private property by private corporations to do these projects. So what are your thoughts on that? And have you heard anything from your opponents on this issue and where they stand on it?
Yeah, when I first entered this race, some of the first events I went to, the rhetoric around it was very different than it is now. So we had a debate at Live Oak High School. I think it was Thursday night, or maybe it was, Thursday night. And whenever that question was asked, every single candidate had an answer that was something akin to, no, I don't like it. Now, the problem is multiple people in this race have already voted in favor of it. So you can't really defend a voting record. But now they're all saying, when they're asked about it, oh, yeah, I really don't like it. But, they'll give like a politician answer. We do have, I heard Misty Cordell say that she was opposed to it. And she was even asked, about her association with Jeff Landry. And she said, he is my friend, but we don't necessarily agree on everything. So I heard her say that. I heard Sammy White be opposed to it, which he may be opposed to it, but what I get from him is, every one of his answers at that debate, you could have swapped them to any of the questions and they're all the same. He doesn't have very talking points for it other than he's an outsider. I'm an outsider too.
Yeah.
So you got to stand for a little more than just that.
And that's something he has, I think that's something he has going for him. That is to his credit, right? That he is an outsider on the issue. But what you said.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what you said about the other candidates, and I can just reaffirm that because of our legislative advocacy work, all of the current elected officials who are running for this position have all voted in favor of carbon capture sequestration, have all voted in favor of eminent domain for carbon capture and sequestration. So you really have to look at the record. It's one thing to say something. It's another thing to look at how they actually voted. And so you're right. That is a real distinction there that you make.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, why is that even a Republican stand? Why is that something Republicans are standing for? Like, what? And that's something that frustrates me, and it's one of the reasons I'm running. It's one of the reasons I have this burden on me to do this, is that I don't see any of our so-called conservative Republicans. I don't see any of them actually holding conservative stands. None of them are actually doing conservative things. It's turned into corporate cronyism. Just look at some of the bills we've seen recently and some of the things that have passed. Do any of those things that are being pushed by Republicans really represent the columns of what a Republican is supposed to be as far as small government, religious liberty, and individual freedoms? Any of those pillars of what we're supposed to be formed upon, do we represent that anymore? No, we don't. None of our Republicans, some of them, I'm like, man, why are you're literally a rhino. You're just registered as a Republican because you're in a deep red state. It's like eminent domain for something that I think almost none of the Republican base even believes in climate change. And that's the whole justification for it. And even if you do want to say that it's going to help sell products overseas or whatever for these companies, that's corporate welfare, and we shouldn't stand for welfare. We should stand for a free market. If it can't survive without our subsidies, then it shouldn't happen. Bottom line, period. I'm against all welfare, corporate and private. When the Democrats are in power, they push individual welfare, and when the Republicans are in power, it seems they push corporate welfare. Both forms of welfare are bad. You have to have a true free market, and decisions should be made around, is this going to work economically or not? If it's not, we shouldn't do it.
Amen. And I couldn't agree with you more, and that's so well put, Austin. I saw on your website, on your campaign website, a quote from you that says, "Give me a shot. I can't do any worse than the rest of them." Which I love.
That's it.
And because they are doing
can
so
we really
horribly.
do any worse? Go just give me a shot.
Hard to imagine it. It's hard to imagine it.
Can I do any worse?
What you said, Austin, about
can't.
the 45Q tax credits, it's exactly right. Without those federal tax subsidies, CCS would fold up like a cheap lawn chair because there really isn't any organic market demand for this.
No, like $15 a ton is what these companies are paying to be net zero, like zero CO2 essentially produced versus what's sequestered. So they're paying $15 a ton for that just to be able to save their grain, but the government's going to give them 85 a ton. So that it's not just crazy money, it's insane money. If they're making money at 15 a ton, if that can be done, and they're going to pay them 85 a ton, like you can, and it's the job situation. That's what I don't understand is the argument has been, oh, we need jobs. Well, I'm a business owner, and I can tell you right now, the problem is finding people. We don't have an issue with jobs. I could grow as much as I wanted to if I could find qualified people, but people are just that we need to really work on from an education standpoint. People coming up out of the school systems are really just not, I don't want to say qualified, but
Equipped.
I ask people all the time, I hire young people, and I'm like, did your dad never build a birdhouse with you? Like, did you can't read a tape measure? Really? You're 20 years old and you can't read a tape measure, or you can't do this? It's like, wow, this is bad. We've got to, at some point, invest in our workforce and invest in our people. We've got to have these trade schools and everything funded. Because if we don't want a lot of people just working at Dollar General or pushing a button or whatever, we need to have people who are builders and understand how to make things and how things work and have good jobs. We've got jobs. We just need people. We need people to fill those spots. We don't want to be bringing people in from out of state. And it was even brought up at the debate. They talked about the H-1Bs and such. And it's like, we have a demand for labor. We need more labor. Well, and my response to that was, even with things like, agriculture and crawfish farming, whatever you need H-1B. The truth is, there's a lot of things being automated and can be automated. Like, I saw a video of a robotic system folding towels at a hotel, and somebody was talking about it. They're like, that's terrible. That's taking away jobs from Americans. And I'm like, no, first of all, they probably weren't going to be American jobs. Next of all, that's not the kind of jobs we want. We don't need jobs folding towels. That machine there's going to be people to program it, people to sell it, maintain it, come by and do PMs on it, maintenance plans on it, people that work on that system and the materials in it. There's still jobs being created by things like that, but what you get is more economic output per capita. So you have less of the mundane tasks being done. If a job is so mundane and so tedious that an American doesn't want to do it, let's find a better way to do it rather than just try to import cheap labor. That's where I'm at on that. And I think that kind of goes with the CCS too, because the whole argument with CCS is we need jobs. So I just don't see that.
I'll ask you a final question on this. I have a son who's about to graduate from high school, and obviously he has friends, and so we talk to them periodically. And there's still this overwhelming pressure in high school, when you graduate from high school, to go straight to the 4-year college route. Oftentimes they don't really know what they want to do. They go and they inherit a lot of debt. Then they graduate. They don't really have a marketable skill. And this, so my thought is, have you thought about emphasizing more on the high school level, the learning of skilled trades, and encouraging young men and women to take the alternative route rather than just locking into this traditional 4-year college plan that oftentimes leaves them in a worse position than when they started? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. We have to have people that are going to take up these trades, because AI is not going to do that. AI is not going to come fix your pipes or wire your house or whatever else. You got to have people who can do a physical job, but you also have to have people that are competent and understand what they're doing, because even some of these people being pushed through these trade programs are learning the rules and how to do this specific thing. And I think that's us as a society doing that. We're teaching people how to do something a certain way and not why we do it that way. And I think that's important too. So it's good to have people educated in both senses, but what you have, and I'll say this, and I might upset some people with this, but I went to a 4-year college. I went to Southeastern. I got a degree in industrial technology. And to be honest, I met some of the dumbest people I've ever met in my life in college. And there were a lot of people who just didn't care and were just, looking over at the guy next to him's homework, and they just kind of trudge along through it, and the college is happy to take their money. They're not going to not give them a degree. They're going to they're going to let them get eked on through, and they're not going to complain because they want their money. They want that tuition. So where we at, and I don't know if you can legislate that, so to speak. We're talking more about something as a society and our failures for what we actually do besides legislation, but I really think things need to be taken more serious. And I think we've really seen since COVID even a decline in just competency across the board with all trades and all skills. There's things all the time that I look at and I'm like, oh wow, that's people are getting away doing that. They're doing things like that and still in business.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I don't know what changed, but it seems like it was around COVID.
Yeah. And I
Go
just
ahead,
want
I'm
to
sorry.
Sorry, no, I think there's just a little bit of a delay, so it's causing us some back and forth. But I wanted to add to what you were saying earlier on the carbon capture piece, where, one of the points is that we need jobs. And I think the point is, the point that people have been making is, all of our pipe fitters and our welders and all that have worked traditionally in the oil and gas industry need a place to go because we've done such a poor job as a state to keep that kind of industry attracted here. So my answer to that, and you can weigh in here, is why don't we fix the problem instead of creating a new problem? Like this is, y'all are putting a Band-Aid that's a pretty nasty infected Band-Aid on a problem instead of actually addressing head on what the real issue is, which is the lawsuits and the way that the regulations of this state have driven oil and gas into Houston.
Yeah. So really, I'm going to put it like this. That's kind of my niche. That's what I hire. I hire pipe fitters. I hire fitters in general and people that can weld. Nobody that can weld pipe, fit pipe, any of that, any of these jobs that would be affected by carbon capture, none of those people are looking for work. Those people are as busy as they want to be. They make as much money as they want. If they are worth their salt, they don't have to worry about a job. There's always a demand for the skilled people like that. The people who are looking for jobs and need jobs are people who are more of a helper or have not necessarily been worth their salt or are good on that job. So I don't really I see all the work they could ever want right here in our current industry, because somebody that's a good pipe fitter that they can make a rolling offset and hit a target and do all that. They can also build a building. They can also mount a pump and set clearances and all that. There's other jobs in not necessarily just doing pipe, but they can find a job in some manufacturing facility or some plant. There's positions for them, and they're in demand.
Yeah.
There's openings everywhere.
That's
I don't
a
know
great
anybody
point.
that's skilled and does that type of work.
Yeah, that's a great point,
looking for work.
Austin.
They're not.
That's
So
a great point.
when these carbon capture projects come in, they're going to be out-of-state workers.
That's a great point
They
you
will
make,
be. There'll
Austin.
be out-of-state workers coming in to build these pipelines.
Wow.
So basically, you're saying the jobs are there. We need the skill. The people have the skill and the ability to go in and make a contribution. They can find a job, number one. And number two, you're not convinced that when they say we need CCS jobs, you're not convinced that it's going to be Louisiana citizens who actually are taking these jobs.
I'm not convinced. And did you see what was it? Was it Beaver Lake Energy or something like that? I'm sure y'all know about it, about how they filed for, basically they had a promise on how many jobs it was going to create. And then after they got the permit, they applied for an exemption on that. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
So they're basically lying on how many jobs they're going to create anyway.
Wow.
That's a great point. A great point. Well, Austin, it's absolutely.
I'm already trying, because I mean, we have.
No, go ahead. I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead, Chris. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I didn't mean to step on you. I was just going to say, and I hear people talk about carbon capture and being against it, but I'm the only one that I know of actively advocating for it. I wrote probably 4 dozen different letters at this point to different representatives in the House. And I'm trying to get, that's Democrats and Republicans, bipartisan. I actually looked up their voting records, and I asked Grok. I used AI on that, so maybe I'm part of the problem too with the overuse of AI, but it is helpful for some things. I asked, based on voting records and where people's stances are, which representatives are most likely to help us with this. And I have written personal letters to each one. I've customized them based on their voting record and what they looked up, what they stand for. And that's time I've taken away that I could be campaigning, but I'm passionate about this. I want to stop it. I've sent letters to each of those representatives because we have legislation hung up in committee right now that may never see the light of day to repeal that 45Q. I think it was Scott Perry introduced it, and it just doesn't have enough co-signers. All we need is a few more representatives to open their eyes and say, hey, these people are going to be in trouble if we don't get rid of this tax credit. And it's costing the American people a lot of money anyway. I mean, what's it project, over $100 billion or something like that? What else could we do with $100 billion? What else could we fix or do that would be an actual product and something that Louisiana could use? If you say the money, like the governor saying, oh, well, the money's already allocated for us, so we need to use it, bring it to Louisiana. I'm pretty sure we have enough common sense people in the executive branch to look at that and say, okay, if they really care about us from that perspective, if this money is there and we don't, the country's broke, but if we really did have this money allocated and set aside for this, and this is something that nobody wants, that they're worried about, that's dangerous, that could kill people, that could poison people's way of life, why don't we just take that same amount of money and roll it into different infrastructure projects? That would be humongous. That would be a huge package for America. So it doesn't make any sense. So I'm advocating and begging people to get on and co-sign this legislation to repeal this 45Q, because it's got to go. And I think if anybody actually does just a little bit of surface level research, they're going to understand how bad it is. And unless they're just completely bought and paid for or corrupt, they're going to help us. So I'm trying right now. I'm begging people, come on, y'all help us. And that's what I'm going to fight for. And that's the way I'll reach across the aisle and do if y'all put me in Washington. I'm going to do that. I'm going to work every day. I've got the work ethic. That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
So I want to fix it. And I don't want to wait till I get in office to start fixing it. I'm going ahead and I'm trying to establish relationships and make it happen.
Yeah. Well, you're doing a very, very good job. And it seems to be, as I said earlier, the only one who seems to have an understanding of the issue here and the real menace that this is. And, as we said earlier, all of these other issues about eminent domain and the dangers to the water aquifers and our way of life, none of those would be an issue if it wasn't for the 45Q tax credits. So I think that because it would go away without that. So I think your focus on that issue is just spot on. And don't let anybody ever convince you that they would continue to move forward with these projects if they didn't have those tax subsidies, because it would not happen. It just simply wouldn't happen. And so I think your focus on that is very, very good and very refreshing. That you're trying to sound the alarm on that issue.
And just quickly, Austin, before we let you go, remind people where they can find you on social media, how they can support your campaign. I'm going to put your campaign website up here, austinmageeforcongress.com. But what social media can they find you?
So you can find me. I'm on Facebook, X, and TikTok. I'm not on Instagram yet. I haven't. People keep telling me to get on Instagram. I haven't done that yet. Maybe I will, but we're down in crunch time. I might as well just focus on what I have. You can find me at austinmageeforcongress.com. You can donate. If you go up to the upper right-hand corner, there's a donate spot right there. Anything you give, $5, $10 is appreciated right now. I'm trying to get more signs bought and up. So whatever anybody can give, that's greatly appreciated. I'm running a true grassroots campaign. I have no PACs, no lobbyists, no big donors. I'm taking individual small contributions only. And the most important thing, if I'm about to get off, I'll go ahead and give my spiel if that's cool.
Go for it.
Go for it.
Or do y'all have more questions? I'm sorry.
No. Go for it.
So what I want to do, the most important thing I can do above all else is prove that as a country, we can actually change this and turn things around. We can put our government back in our hands. I'm running to prove that through the power of things like social media, true grassroots, door knocking, getting the word out. I've got flyers and things. If anybody wants to help me get the word out, please get with me. I'll get you all the propaganda you want. And we're trying to just get the message out from a true grassroots perspective. But that's what we need. We need to prove to these people there's almost $10 million raised in this race right now. And I've spent just a few thousand. So if we can really put me in a runoff, that's going to be a giant middle finger to this establishment. And it's going to prove that your money can't buy it anymore. It's power back to the people. We need to have a true wave of candidates like me who are really just wanting to do the right thing, feeling led to do this and serve the people. And I can represent the average Republican voter in District 5 better than anybody because I am the average Republican voter in District 5. That's who I am. Like, that's me. If you came to my house and checked out and saw how I live and what I do and how I make a living, I am the average Republican voter in District 5. So the job is representative, and that's what I'll be. I'll be a representative of you. I'm educated, but I'm also a hard worker. I've got good work ethic. I've got good morals. Nobody's going to blackmail me. If you try to look into me, you're not even going to find a speeding ticket. I've lived a clean life, and I'm trying. That's another reason I feel led to do this is that I don't feel like I can be blackmailed by anything other than threat of death. And good luck with that. You'll have to kill me. I'm going to do the right thing. Y'all please support me, spread the word, because the only way I'm going to get it is by people just spreading the word and talking about me. So that's what we need in this country. We've got to flip the tables and put our government back in our hands.
Yes. A refreshing face in the 5th District congressional race. Austin Magee. Early voting starts May 2nd and Election Day May 16th. Thank you so much for joining us today, Austin, and for your willingness to enter the fray.
Yeah, God bless you, Austin. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank y'all. I appreciate y'all having me.
Talk
God
to you
bless
soon.
y'all. Have a
You
great
too.
day.
You too. I really enjoyed the discussion with Austin Magee, and now we have the absolute pleasure of talking to a woman who's running for Congress in Louisiana's 6th District, Monique Appeaning. With more than 25 years of experience serving in both the executive and legislative branches of government, Monique brings deep knowledge, strong leadership, and a commitment to conservative principles. Throughout her career, she's worked to ensure accountability, transparency, and policies that put Louisiana families first. Join me in welcoming Monique. Monique, welcome to the show.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. It's an honor.
Well, Monique, it's an honor to have met you. I was telling Chris that you and I met this weekend at kind of a worship event that is very difficult to describe unless you were there. And I definitely described it both to him and to you as something that your average politician is not going to be found at. This was something, it was a special meeting, to say the least. And it was for people who truly are seeking the Lord and who are truly, I don't know, care about the future of the state. It was an event focused on the future of our state. So that's where we connected through our mutual friend, Sue Garcia. Big shout out to Sue. She's so wonderful. She leads Intercessors for America, the Louisiana chapter, and is just doing an excellent job with that. And it's just such a blessing to the state. Her leadership is.
It really is.
Monique, whenever she introduced us, you were telling me that you have a background in putting together budgets and tearing budgets apart, understanding what budgets are. And that was the number one thing that you were excited to get to Washington, to get your hands on the budget. Would you tell us a little bit about your background and why you got into the race?
I appreciate you asking. Yes, I'm really excited about this, the opportunity to be able to use my skills. I started out and got my teeth cut professionally in the Office of Planning and Budget and the Division of Administration, which is the governor's branch of the day-to-day fiscal management. And so we put together budgets. I started out in what they call the management intern program in the planning section. And then they combined those sections where I had individual budgets that were assigned to me. So I've dealt with different departments from, the Office of Group Benefits down to the Louisiana Commission on Law Enforcement, even the division's budget. So I've dealt with putting budgets together, and I rose up even as a budget manager all the way up to an assistant commissioner for management and finance, helping to put together budgets, making real policy decisions in the division, as well as providing recommendations to elected officials, including the governor. And so it really has been an exciting opportunity to be able to say, you know what, these skills can actually go to Washington. I can actually work and help put together a balanced budget, because a balanced budget is required even at the state level. I mean, there have been difficult decisions over the years that elected officials have had to make regarding balancing budgets. And that's what I'm excited about. I'm super excited about being able to go to Washington and say, yes, we can do it. Doing a line by line analysis, I know that we can get a balanced budget in Washington.
Yeah. And things that they should be doing that oftentimes they're not doing for whatever reason. And, based upon what I've seen in your background, you have the discipline to be able to come in and do what's necessary to make sure that we have a balanced budget, because that's so important. I mean, going back to, to President Reagan and even before, the importance of balancing our budget, which essentially is just not spending more money than we're taking in. And that's how you create debt. That's how you create deficits. And so it's refreshing to see someone with your background who understands the importance of the fiscal issues. Because frankly, I don't think that there are enough of our representatives who have an appreciation or even an understanding of the economic and fiscal and budgetary issues that are so critically important for economic growth.
And Chris, if you don't mind, I might just jump in here.
Yeah.
Monique, so last year, the Louisiana legislature, I know you're running for Congress, but I just want to get your take on this from a budgetary perspective. The Louisiana legislature passed a bill, which is now law, that kind of has pulled out and itemized what the NGO's spending is from the state's perspective. So the state has to show clearly what nonprofits we are funding.
Mm-hmm.
If you were in charge of the budget and the direction of the budget, what would you do with that block of NGOs that you see sitting there all nice telling you what they are?
Oh, that's an interesting question. One of the things that I would definitely look at is see whatever those NGOs are doing, does it align with some of the things that we're already doing in departments? You're catching me cold on it, but what I would do is that, for example, if there's some type of service for the elderly, I would look at the Office of Elderly Affairs and see if there's a duplication in effort. Is there something as far as those resources that's going to some of those entities? Is it something that we can do in the departments? Is there a way to save money? Is there a way to provide more services by working with the respective departments? And so I would have to look at each one of them. There could be some that the question is why? Why are we funding these things? So we would have to look, because there could be resources that could be redirected to departments where we can actually maximize existing programs that are already taking place, that are already ongoing. That's one of the things that I would look at, because it could be that we have a big question. One of the things that I'll mention that I talked about early on in the campaign, and I'm using the Office of Elderly Affairs. And I was a newbie at the time, but it broke my heart to know that people didn't have food, that the elderly were not getting food. And so one of the things that we were looking at, and everything is not about cuts, but we have to be responsible with our reductions. And one of the things that we looked at, and like I said, I was a newbie at the time, I did not want to recommend reducing it. And I was actually able to win that argument, so to provide food, because some of the elderly, the most vulnerable, they need to be able to have food early on every day. And that was just one of the things that I remember and looking at the Office of Elderly Affairs.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And thank you for letting me drop that on you.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, me too. And I do agree with you. There has to be a balance of making sure that, that we are, providing a safety net for people who truly need it, because a humane society has to have that while not allowing it to be abused, and making sure that, we're consolidating taxpayer resources as efficiently as possible, which brings me to this question. And just want to get your thoughts on this, Monique. Last time I checked, we have about 500, close to 500 boards and commissions in Louisiana right now. And I will guarantee you that there are, I guarantee there's waste within those boards and commissions. There are probably duplication of efforts within those boards and commissions. And it doesn't look like they've really been scrutinized to see the extent to which we consolidate, downsize, streamline our resources. What are your thoughts on just this labyrinthine structure that we have of all these boards and commissions in the state of Louisiana?
A great question. I think we need a task force to actually look at it, to be able to look at consolidation, to your point, to be able to do an analysis of what those expenditures and the revenue, what are they doing with those dollars? Are there some, do we really need them? So I think we should be able to look at eliminating some of them. But I think if we go through the process of actually putting together a task force and looking at them, and we can say that maybe within a 3 to 5 year period that we can eliminate, that we can reduce, that we can consolidate those boards and commissions. I think that is something that we would be able to look at.
I'm so glad to hear you say that.
Yes, I think it's something that we really, it's time for us to be able to do that, because the taxpayers, those that, whether there's a license connected to it, looking at those fees, or these fees, or these actually taxes, what's going on with them. And I think the time is now for us to be able to do something with that.
Yeah, I think it's certainly time. One of the other issues that is just absolutely resonating across your district, across the 5th District, and really across the state, is this issue of carbon capture and sequestration. I had a chance to listen to you on Brian Halding's radio show, and he asked you straight out, what is the most resonating issue as you talk to voters across your district? And you said very quickly, carbon capture and sequestration. Where do you stand on that issue, and what are the concerns that you have about it?
Great question again. It was very interesting for that question or for this issue to come up. It's one of my top issues now. It's one of the top things I'm concerned about. And I'll tell you what I did in preparation of talking about it. I pulled up my Constitution, and I think it's important for us to talk about the Constitution. Article 1, Section 4, rights of property. It says that every person has the right to acquire, own, control, use, enjoy, protect, and dispose of property. In Section B, it says property shall not be taken or damaged by the state or its political subdivision except for public purposes. We have a problem because there's some issues right now with carbon capture and what's going on with eminent domain. Property rights are at stake right now. And I have serious concerns with the way things are going. And I am here to protect the property owners. I have great concern with what's going on in Baton Rouge, at our Capitol, with our elected officials. And I think we need to change some of the things that we've done, some of the things that our elected officials have done. And I think that they have an opportunity to fix it right now. And even dealing with the credits. 45Q on the federal level. Once elected, I want to be able to eliminate that because right now, or we need to repurpose it. I think that there has to be some real strong discussions on what's going on to take the carbon and put it in the ground to impact our aquifers, our drinking water. For over 50% of the areas, the water that's being provided for our state is problematic. For that CO2 to go in is problematic at best. And so I have serious concerns going on the trail, going on the campaign trail, traveling from Shreveport all the way in Baton Rouge. What I've heard time and time again, that people are concerned about their rights, the fact that their property is being taken, the fact that no one's really listening to them at our state capitol is problematic. And so where do I stand? I stand with the people. I stand with the communities that are voicing their concerns. And I'm like, is anyone listening other than me? Because there's some serious issues that we need to be able to address dealing with the right of your property is an essential thing for us. And so I have great concerns regarding the property rights of all of our, whether it's the farmers or any property owner. So I have issues, and I want to be able to address the CCS.
Yeah, that's a huge issue is the eminent domain, as you touched on, Monique. The idea that a person who says, I don't want this, I don't want these pipelines on my property, I don't want CO2 waste to be permanently buried under my property, so go take it somewhere else. And for them to be able to say, a private corporation, well, sorry, but we have the right of eminent domain, so we're going to go. You can either do it willingly, or we're just going to take it. I can't think of anything that is more fundamentally contrary to really basic constitutional freedom than that. And that's really apart from how a person may feel about carbon capture and sequestration on the merits. So it's a huge issue, and I'm very, very glad to hear you say where you stand on it, that you stand with property owners and taxpayers on this issue. And I could not agree with you more, being someone who's in the legislature, often representing LeCAG, my advocacy group. I think that there's enormous frustration that our legislators are simply, with very few exceptions, and there are some exceptions, okay, very few exceptions, that our legislators are really not listening to the voice of the people there in the Capitol.
And I'm glad.
Yeah, and I would just add, Monique. Oh, go ahead, Monique. Sorry, there's a little delay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm really concerned as well, and I don't know if I've put enough emphasis on it. Just it's our drinking water. I mean, why in the world would we even be in that situation where we would compromise the quality of our water, our drinking water? And one of the aquifers providing over 50% of water for our state, for us to even jeopardize it, to me, it's unthinkable for us to be able to do that. And the other thing that I did want to mention, Louisiana, it's not just Louisiana. There are other states that's also facing this issue, that's also pushing back, dealing with the issues that we're talking about right now, whether it's Iowa, North Dakota, South Dakota. There's also Nebraska. It's also Illinois. It's also Texas. It's also Wyoming. It's also Mississippi. It's also Montana. So it's not just Louisiana. People are beginning to rise up. And I do believe that our elected officials have an opportunity to fix this even now. We're still in session. The time is not over. And I'm hoping that they'll be able to look at it and think about what we're doing, not only now, but for future generations. This is a real serious issue to me. It's the number one issue that we need to be talking about when we look at public health. I mean, it's a safety issue. And then the whole issue of eminent domain that we were talking about earlier. This is a pro-gas, pro-oil state. We all for economic development, but we're talking about our water quality. We're talking about private property. And so I really think that they have an opportunity to relook this, to rethink about what they want to do. And when elected, I'm going to have that discussion about Q. I'm ready day one to go in and address those issues because it's critical for us to be able to repurpose it. If we're going to have credits, let's look at it. Let's look at the farmers. Let's look at the oystermen. Let's look at where we need to be able to best use those dollars if we're going to really go in and take a strong look at what we're doing with respect to CCS.
Yeah. Well, you'd be a good ally to Senator John Fleming, I think, on the 4Q, because he has spoken repeatedly about the 4Q tax credits and whether or not those tax credits are best used to promote what we believe really ultimately is a scam, or whether they should be repurposed for use in industry that actually benefits Louisiana citizens. But you're right, Monique, there are multiple states that are either taking formal or informal action against this CCS. And I just have a few here, and you named some of them: Illinois, California, South Dakota, Iowa, Florida, Alabama, Nebraska, Indiana, West Virginia, Oklahoma, and probably other states that have expressed real concerns about this. And so, again, it's good to hear your voice as someone who's aware of what's going on here and is willing to speak out about it, because a lot of citizens right here in our state and your district very concerned.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that we'll be seeing in the next couple of months, perhaps even sooner, what states their representatives actually represent the people and which ones actually represent something else. Monique, on the topic of things that are concerning to citizens with regard to kind of industry, since your district will cover Shreveport, are you hearing a lot of concerns about the AI data centers that are also popping up over there?
One of the things that people are talking about is water usage. And so to cool those centers, that's one of the concerns that I'm hearing. People are happy about the economic development, but the question is, the consumption of water, the consumption of utilities. That's one of the things that people are looking at, making sure that that is not a burden on the taxpayers, but that those companies are actually able to utilize those resources, but they will cover the expense of those resources that will be utilized. I mean, people are excited about it, but again, the cost, the infrastructure, the capacity.
Yeah. And what does it mean for their bottom line?
Yes.
Yeah. Danielle, any final thoughts for Monique today?
I guess, Monique, would you just maybe give us kind of your elevator pitch? Why should people support you? What would you bring for the people of the 6th District? And I will put up your campaign website as well while you're doing that.
Thank you. One of the things that I do want to talk about, I'm the right person for this time. I bring in what I call a safe path forward. My focus, one of the things I mentioned earlier is dealing with CCS. It's something that I've been hearing. The other things that I'm talking about is having safe communities and a strong military, affordable living with conservative tax policies. We're talking about reductions. I still believe that we can go in and look at tax cuts. We can talk about having a balanced budget and a future made in America. And what is that talking about? That's talking about bringing back manufacturing into America. That's also talking about protecting our farmers and defending the American agriculture. And then everyday accountability. What I want us to do, and I want to be able to even have a dashboard where we're talking about visible leadership across all 10 parishes. having real oversight in Washington, and having results-driven representation. I'm excited about running. I'm excited about representing our state. I'm excited about representing the 6th Congressional District. And one of the things I do want to mention is that I'm not just a Republican, but I'm actively involved. I'm actively engaged. Not only am I a part of the party, but I'm president of the Republican Women of St. George. I'm also a trust member with the LAGOP. I'm also what you call a regent with the National Federation of Republican Women. And with the Louisiana Federation of Republican Women, I'm also what you call a Magnolia member. So I'm heavily involved. I'm not just a Republican, but I have a vested interest in our conservative policies going forward. I love the opportunity to represent us. I look forward to meeting you all again, having more discussions, and having discussions to see if we can have the major issue that we talked about today was carbon capture, to be able to have changes with respect to carbon capture, because it's really our number one public health issue, because we're talking about water quality and property owners' rights. So I thank you all for the opportunity to be able to come before you today. It's an honor. It really is.
It's our privilege. It's our privilege to have you. Keep up the good work on the trail. Early voting starts on May 2nd, Election Day, May 16th. Monique Appeaning, thanks again for joining us on the State of Freedom.
Thank you all. It was a pleasure. Bye-bye.
God bless you, Monique.
Thank you. You all too.
All right, Chris. Well, it has been a jam-packed morning already. And I just wanted to mention, we didn't bring these people onto the show by accident. These candidates were not just random selections. We chose them for a reason. We've been looking into the field, all 3 of these fields. We have done significant research, and these are the 3 candidates: Dr. John Fleming for U.S. Senate, Austin Magee for Congressional District number 5, and Monique Appeaning for Congressional District number 6. All 3 of these are candidates who really represent the heart of the Louisiana people. They represent the best of Louisiana, I think, Chris, and they are not looking for another notch on their political ladder.
Exactly. These are people, based upon our evaluation, who are running for the right reasons and have a particular sensitivity to our perspective, to core principles of limited government, constitutional government, and having an ear that is responsive to the citizens, which I think is a source of growing frustration, Danielle, throughout our state, that citizens really do not feel that their voice is being heard. I don't know that I've ever seen this level of frustration on the part of citizens across the state with regard to the responsiveness of their government to their needs. And so, based upon our evaluation of all of the candidates in these races, in the U.S. Senate race, in the Congressional 5th District, and in the Congressional 6th, voting records, background, what we have gleaned from what the candidates have said on issues that are critically important to us, I feel very confident in making these endorsements. U.S. Senate, John Fleming, U.S. Congress for the 5th District, Austin Magee, and then the U.S. Congress for the 6th District. It's Monday. Monique Appeaning, very comfortable with these endorsements. No candidates are perfect. Every candidate has strengths and weaknesses, but on balance, I believe that we've made the right decision on these endorsements, and I'm very, very happy to be able to weigh in on behalf of these candidates. So on behalf of LeCag and on behalf of the State of Freedom, I think we're on board, and we're going to move forward and spread the word and do everything that we can do to ensure that these candidates advance not only beyond the primaries, but into the general election and hopefully beyond, because we need public servants like this.
Yeah, and Chris, Dr. Fleming really touched on something, and I think it probably hit a nerve with a lot of Louisiana citizens, with a lot of our viewers, that Governor Landry is someone that most of us supported because what we believed him to be, because of what was portrayed to us in the media. Of course, the State of Freedom was very new at that point. We were still all smarting from COVID and the lockdowns, and really felt like He had been a leader against that on the national level and at the state level for some of the COVID tyranny, and maybe didn't do any deeper digging into his background. And so a lot of us have come to regret the decision we made to vote for him. A lot of us regret not having dug a little bit deeper into his background and his track record. And so we're reaping the consequences of that right now with him as governor, I would say. And I'll also say that we've learned our lessons. And so I think we've done enough digging on these three candidates to feel very comfortable supporting them versus the field. Like you said, there's no perfect candidate, but we're all human. There's no perfect human except for Jesus. So I think that we are making these as clear-eyed recommendations versus maybe what we did when we were supporting Governor Landry, who seems to have somewhere along the way lost his interest in supporting the people and fighting for the people of this state.
Yeah. If he ever had a sincere interest in doing so, which, remains to be seen. Nobody can get inside of his mind, inside of his heart, to determine whether or not he ever had a real philosophical commitment to constitutional conservatism. We don't know, and frankly, we're not charged with answering that question at this moment. We are able to observe what he has done since he's been elected. And, with very few exceptions, most of what he has done, I think, undercut and undermined good constitutional government that is responsive to the will of the citizens of Louisiana. And so that's where we are on that. And again, we've looked at all of the candidates in all of these races, and there is no doubt, and especially, but not only, Danielle, on the issue of carbon capture and sequestration, which we have always said is perhaps the most critically important issue on the horizon right now in Louisiana, because it's the one issue that we have that touches on massive expenditures of our money. It focuses on our physical and environmental health. And of course, it focuses on core private property rights. We have got to get this issue right, because if we don't and we allow this menace to continue in our state, I think the precedent on all three of those facets is going to bode very poorly for the future of our state if we allow this precedent to stand, which is why we focus very much on the carbon capture and sequestration issue, although it's not the only issue. We believe when it comes to limited government and a recognition that the role of government is simply to secure basic core rights that are afforded to us, not by government, but by God. And it's the responsibility of government to secure those basic rights. These three candidates seem to be more attuned to that fundamental principle of government than any of the other ones. And so that is why we're happy to support them. I think Austin Magee, frankly, is a very, very refreshing face in particular, because he really is the type of candidate that was very common for the first 100 years, 150 years of our country's existence. It was always men, women, before women were allowed to run and vote, and even vote. But it was always men who had established themselves in the private sector, who had been successful and were simply seeking to give back based upon the blessings of prosperity that they had received from our government, and that was purely designed to be of service. We have way too many people running for office now, Danielle, who are seeking something in it for themselves. And I think without exception, all three of these candidates that we are endorsing are motivated sincerely by a desire to serve the people and to be answerable to the people. And I really can't say that about the other candidates. Not a difficult choice. It was very important that we did the background work and we looked at every candidate, because that's always important. And I think we've come to the right decision. I'm very comfortable with it.
Yeah, and I won't touch too much more on Dr. Fleming, because we've had him on the show before. We have long supported him. But I was also really impressed with Monique. I think having someone run who actually has government budget experience is just amazing, and I think will be a huge boon to the country and to the state if she is to get in. So I'm really hopeful for her as well, and just grateful for this slate of candidates. And Chris, one other thing, when you were talking, I realized, of course, we were prepping for this pretty late at night, and our other bellwether issue, my bellwether issue of all issues, is elections. And we neglected to talk to them about this issue. However, we do know where Dr. Fleming stands on that issue. He is very much in favor of handmarked paper ballots, same-day voting, not of all this nonsense that we're dealing with now with machines and 2 weeks of early voting or a voting month, I believe. But you know what? We should double check. Let's commit to double check. And when we come back on Thursday, we will be able to say for sure where Monique and where Austin stand on the issue of election integrity, because I think that's a very important issue for voters as well to know going into this. Some of our sitting congressional members have said crazy things like, that we don't, there, of course, 2020 was stolen, but there's nothing to talk about now, or, refuse to look at it because they believe that it's a state's issue. Although, of course, it's a state's issue. It's also a federal issue. But I think the point is the people who don't want to take the courageous step on this want it to be any issue that's not in their purview. And I'm tired of that. I'm very tired of that.
Exactly. Me too. And, at a minimum, Danielle, Treasurer Fleming has expressed much more openness and sympathy for secure hand-marked paper ballots, same-day voting, which is the position that President Trump and his administration have expressed routinely and publicly. Neither one of the other two candidates, Letlow or Cassidy, has expressed any openness or willingness to look at the security of our election system. So that certainly gives Fleming the nod there. And in the 5th district race, in which we've endorsed Austin Magee, the representatives in that race, Eccles, Edmonds, and Magee, have voted in favor of legislation that actually diminishes transparency in our election system, and have resisted the cries of many citizens who've testified in committee about the importance of stepping back and not rushing forward to invest in $160 million new voting system. But that has all fallen on deaf ears. So we have no reason to believe that they are going to be supportive on the issue. I would suspect that Austin Magee understands the vulnerabilities of the system, understands the vulnerability of electronic voting, and certainly would support President Trump on continuing to push for secure hand-marked paper ballots. So, yeah, that is an issue that I feel comfortable with him there. And also, Monique, we didn't get a chance to talk to her specifically about that. But again, I haven't heard her opponent, Larry Davis, certainly haven't heard Cleo Fields express any desire to reform our election system and to do away with these computer-based voting systems. So that's not going to change our position on this.
Right. It's not going to change our position on them, but it would certainly be a strengthening point in their favor. And it's an important point for us to all be aware of.
Absolutely. And it's so important. As you've always said, Danielle, that is the fundamental issue, without which all the other issues assume at a minimum secondary importance if we do not have a secure election system.
Yeah, because we can't get any of the other things taken care of without knowing that we have true representatives who can be held accountable.
And voted out.
And that's right. That's being held accountable. Well, let's get into the constitutional amendments, Chris. We've gotten a lot of calls, people interested to know what is LCAG's perspective, what is the State of Freedom's perspective on the constitutional amendments that are on the ballot. As we've mentioned a couple of times now, early voting starts on May 2nd. Election day is May 16th. We would strongly, strongly encourage everyone to show up in person on May 16th. If you want to know why, it's because the difference in the machines. And we've had Draza Smith come on and talk about this before, where the early voting tends to be the majority of Louisiana's voting that comes in because it's so convenient for people. However, those are all basically tabulated on all Dominion machines that are basically iPads or computers. And so those are very easy to change the votes on. These ancient machines that we have that Secretary Landry loves to complain about are a little bit harder to manipulate. we would encourage everyone, and there's less time to manipulate those as well because they have to report those on the same day, whereas these other votes can get changed anywhere along the way. So please, 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 it's very important that you show up to vote. It's very important that you do it on the day of, if at all possible. So we just want to put a reminder, a stake in the ground for that if you care about your vote not being manipulated, the best chance for you to do that is by voting in person on May 16th.
Yes. And in droves,
Yeah.
and making sure that you tell family and friends all to go vote, because if there is an algorithm that has the capacity to switch 2%, 3% of the votes in the electronic voting system, overcoming that algorithm, you do that by having a lot of people who are going to vote, so that even if there is manipulation, that algorithm cannot overcome the will of the people. That's why it's so important that people go vote. Too big to rig. That's why it's so important. I can't emphasize that enough.
Yeah. And now, Chris, let's get into it with the amendments. And you have put these up on LeCAG's Facebook and X pages. I can't remember if I amplified that on the State of Freedom's pages, but if I haven't, I will. The first proposed amendment is one that would basically turn protected merit-based state jobs into political appointments, would give Governor Landry a lot more power than he already has, or whatever governor is in power at that time. And our recommendation is to vote no on this. Would you talk more in depth about what this first proposed amendment is, Chris?
Yes, this is a constitutional amendment. I believe it's by Jay Morris, right, Danielle?
I don't recall, but
Okay,
that's
that's
probably right.
I think it's by Jay Morris, and basically it's a constitutional amendment that would go before the people, and if it passes, it would allow the legislature to pass a law that declassifies current what's called classified civil servants and make them unclassified civil servants. And what that means is the legislature would have really plenary authority to remove or demote or take to censure or reprimand currently classified civil service employees who are protected under our law now from political manipulation or political influence. The reason why the civil service system exists is because it was a reaction against the Huey Long era, where every time there was a new election, the governor would come in and remove and replace civil service workers and inject people in those positions who aligned with his political philosophy. And they were purely political appointments, and they were not based upon the merits of the people who were working in those positions. And it's very dangerous to return the appointment of civil service employees in the state of Louisiana to a purely partisan political process. I think it's dangerous. It's a recipe for corruption and a recipe for really political maneuvering that we don't need. Now, I'm not saying by any means that the current civil service system is perfect. It is not. There is a need for a mechanism whereby civil service employees can be held more accountable now than they currently are now. The criticism is that there's almost no way to reprimand, no way to remove them, even if they're doing a poor job. I personally believe that there is a mechanism in place within the Civil Service Commission that is reasonably workable. But if that part needs to be reformed, the legislature can do that. The legislature can push a constitutional amendment to impose specific reforms within the Civil Service Commission to address this issue, without consigning complete and total authority to the legislature to do whatever they want and to fully open these appointments to political influence. That's the danger. That's the whole reason why we got away from that process to begin with. So our suggestion would be, instead of just giving the legislature carte blanche to do whatever they want on these appointments, to impose some institutional reforms as needed to improve that process within the current structure. But we have real concerns about this amendment because it would place enormous authority on the legislature and on the governor to engage in sort of political cronyism. And I think it's a recipe for corruption. We have to oppose Constitutional Amendment 1 for that reason. You don't replace, I guess, relatively unaccountable bureaucrats, if that is the case, with a system of open and unchecked political cronyism. That's the issue. That's why we're opposing Constitutional Amendment 1, and I think we have the right position.
Well, and Chris, I just want to mention, people might point to the federal government and say that President Trump created a Schedule F so that bureaucrats could be held accountable and they would be easier to fire. I would say that if getting rid of unaccountable bureaucrats is a problem, then, like you said, there are mechanisms to do that. But I think a lot of unaccountable bureaucrats are probably, some of them are probably in places where we actually need them to do work, but there's probably unaccountable bureaucrats that are in places that should just be eliminated altogether, and that option already exists.
And that option already exists. Exactly. Bottom line, Danielle, the constitutional amendment sweeps way too broadly, vests way too much power in the governor and in the legislature, and leaves qualified and competent civil service employees who are currently classified vulnerable to reprimand, demotion, without any sort of check and balance. That's not the solution to the problem.
Okay, let's move on from that one to the second proposed amendment on proposed constitutional amendment on the ballot. This one we are in support of, and it's related to the city of St. George being able to self-govern its school system.
Yes, St. George now has its own corporate structure. It's its own city, and this amendment simply allows St. George to set up its own independent school system. It's a separate corporate structure now, and to be able to use the funds that they're currently sending to the East Baton Rouge Parish bureaucracy and keep it in their own city and use it to strengthen and to build their own education system in St. George. This is not about increasing anybody's taxes. This is about simply repurposing current tax dollars to St. George, proportionate to their population and to the fact that they are a legally autonomous entity right now, and they deserve to have their pro rata and appropriate share of tax resources to build their city and to build their school system. So I think it's very, very important. We've already demonstrated, Danielle, it's already been demonstrated that the public education system in East Baton Rouge Parish is not a success on balance. So St. George, I think, has learned from those mistakes, really, which is one of the primary reasons why they broke away to begin with, in order to be able to establish an education system, an economic infrastructure, and really a culture that is consistent with principles of limited government, fiscal accountability, and really a streamlined approach to government. There's no reason why anybody should oppose Constitutional Amendment 2. Frankly, that's the only constitutional amendment that we are supporting.
All right. Well, the next one we're obviously not supporting, since the last one is the only one we are supporting. But the third proposed constitutional amendment is one that would basically rob Peter to pay Paul, Chris, is also related to education. And this is something that they're putting forward as a teacher pay raise, which they love to do. They love to use the teachers as a political, I don't even know what you call it, as a political tool or a political weapon, when it's really people's lives and livelihoods at stake.
Absolutely. And Danielle, there's no reason. First of all, the constitutional amendment says we need this constitutional amendment so that we can take money out of dedicated education trust funds, billions of dollars, in order to pay down teacher retirement debt so that we can fund a permanent teacher pay raise. Well, we don't believe that education trust funds should be liquidated to do this. Secondly, we don't believe that this even requires a constitutional amendment to give our teachers a permanent teacher pay raise in Louisiana. We need to be streamlining our government. We need to be cutting our costs. And if, in fact, there is a significant surplus that the governor keeps talking about in our government. Why do we need a constitutional amendment to go in? The reason is that Governor Landry wants to liquidate these education trust funds. I don't think we need to be doing that. Bottom line is, we don't need a constitutional amendment to give our teachers a much deserved pay raise. Pass it at the legislature, find the money for it. There's enough waste and abuse in our government to be able to do that. You don't need to put this off on the citizens of the state of Louisiana. And by the way, if you want to do that, if you want to put a constitutional amendment before the people authorizing a permanent teacher pay raise, don't attach it to conditions that involve rating dedicated educational trust funds. If you want to put that before the people, say, do you approve of giving the teachers in Louisiana a permanent pay raise? Boom, question, answer. Most people would say yes, but we're not in a position to be authorizing the rating, as you said, of Peter to pay Paul. We don't need to do it, and it doesn't require a constitutional amendment. You can do this legislatively. You can find a way to do it.
Yeah.
Especially, by the way, excuse me for saying this, especially don't come in here and say that you have to raid education trust funds to pay for this when you are giving multi-billion-dollar corporations these plenary tax credits when they're coming in to parishes to do all these works. No tax credits, billions and billions of dollars of tax credits that the parishes are not getting because you want to create an incentive for these CCS industries to come in and do all these projects. No, you don't need to be doing that. Cut out their tax breaks and maybe use that money to fund the teacher pay raises. But Danielle, by the way, this amendment is the very same amendment that was offered in March of 2025 that the citizens rejected 65%, the very same amendment. The only difference is they're not throwing a whole bunch of other extraneous things into it. Yeah. They thought, well, let's just isolate it. So then the people, our objection is the same as it was before, and we think it should be rejected the same as it was before.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then on to the next one, Chris, the proposed constitutional amendment number 4. This, to me, is just disgusting what they're trying to do. They're trying to say that if you allow us to raid this fund, we'll remove this tax that should never exist in the first place. So Louisiana has an inventory tax, which to me is the most insulting thing you could possibly imagine, because we know that by the time it becomes inventory, it's probably already been taxed 5 times, whatever it is. And so Louisiana has an inventory tax because, I mean, this is exactly why it's very difficult to keep businesses in this state. It's one of the reasons, but it's a symptom of the reasons that it's difficult to keep businesses in this state. Well, to get rid of the inventory tax, they're saying that we're going to take a buyout from the Revenue Stabilization Fund. And Chris, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the Revenue Stabilization Fund is funded through the production of oil and gas. Is that right?
Yes. The severance tax on oil and gas. Yes. And it is designed to have a fund in place for economic downturns. That's why they call it the Revenue Stabilization Fund. And so he wants to go in and raid the Revenue Stabilization Trust Fund, which was set up to anticipate and prepare for economic downturns in the state when it's desperately needed. He wants to raise that in order to be able to fund the elimination, to offset the elimination of the inventory tax. We don't need to do that. Again, streamline our government. Look at all the waste that exists in our government. I've told you before that in Florida, they found well over $1 billion, probably approaching $2 billion in fraud, waste, and abuse because they seriously undertook that effort and that process. I haven't seen that here, and we don't need a constitutional amendment to authorize the raiding of the Revenue Stabilization Trust Fund in order to offset an inventory tax. By the way, Danielle, an inventory tax, and I know the reason why you are so incensed about this. This inventory tax, you've already paid for your goods and services. You're paying for the property on which your inventory sits, and you're paying the government a tax just because you have your inventory that hasn't moved, that is sitting in your warehouse on your property. I think it's absolutely obnoxious, and it makes it so much more difficult to be able to survive economically if you have to pay a tax for the government just because you have inventory that you haven't moved yet. It is so counterintuitive to force a business to pay an inventory tax for items that they own and that they're trying to sell. Are you trying?
It's not counterintuitive. It is criminal. It's absolutely criminal. The government can't seem to get its fingers out of people's pockets. And if this was a conservative legislature like they claim to be, if this is a conservative governor, as he claims to be, they would find a way to get rid of this without robbing our future safety net as a state.
Exactly, which is the whole reason why the Revenue Stabilization Trust Fund was set up to begin with. We don't need to do that. We don't need to set that precedent. That's why it's in the Constitution, by the way, in order to make sure that it has that layer of protection. And I'm thankful. I'm very thankful that he has to go to the people in a statewide vote in order to get this done. And I think the people, if they understand what this does, I believe that they're going to reject this resoundingly, and they should.
Yeah, and I'll also mention, Chris, just quickly, did I just lose my thought here? That Dr. Fleming, I bet if he were asked by the Landry administration or by the legislature to give some recommendations on places where we could save some bucks in the budget, I think he has some ideas. He's already mentioned a number of those on our show when he's come on in previous times. And I also recall last session, and I mentioned this when we were speaking to Monique, that I believe it was Heather Cloud's bill, Senator Heather Cloud's bill last session, that's now law, that basically makes it very clear in the Louisiana state budget what money is going to nonprofit organizations. I think that is a very low-hanging fruit for this legislature to take a long, hard look at and say, okay, what of these is not necessary? What of these is duplicative? And really, you know my perspective, none of those are the role of government. I can appreciate what she was saying about taking care of the elderly, and I agree with that, but I don't think it's the role of government, and there may need to be an off-ramp time period where churches and effective nonprofits, most probably faith-based nonprofits, take up that mantle, but it needs to happen. It's not the role of government to be involved in that. Because the church has not done it well, the government has taken it on, or the government has taken it on because the government wanted to take it on, and so the churches didn't have a role to play anymore. I'm not sure what the chicken or the egg is in that. Either way, it's time for us to start reviewing what the role of government is, what the role of the different spheres of society is, and start handing back the jobs to the people, to the organizations, to the spheres that are best suited to man those. And I also would like to say that I think not only does our budget need to be taken a look at, I think those NGOs need to be approached. We need to look at those NGOs, and we need to look at those boards very, very closely for nepotistic ties, because what you are so concerned about in the first proposed constitutional amendment, where political cronies can be put into all these places and then they are probably not held accountable and not able to get fired, that is already happening with the 500 boards that you mentioned earlier, Chris. That's already happening with these nonprofits that get contracts to serve the state, and not to mention the companies that get contracts to serve the state through nepotistic means. So we got a whole mess. I'm sorry I went off on a sharp left turn there, but I guess I just felt like I needed to have a good rant. I haven't gotten one in today.
Well, that was a good rant right there, Danielle. Final point on the, I want to go back to the constitutional amendment that would allow classified civil servants to be fired much more easily. You realize that if this passes, Danielle, There is absolutely no guarantee that these state employees are going to be any more accountable or held to any higher standard than they are right now.
Yeah.
If they start making it to where they can be appointed at the will of the governor, at the will of the legislature, there's no guarantee that the legislature or the governor is going to hold them to a strict performance standard. They're going to require basically that they are loyal to the people who appointed them. And as long as they're loyal to the people who appointed them, there's no guarantee that there's going to be any merit-based accountability there. It's just going to be different people holding the bag. That's what it comes down to. I mean, when is the last time that anybody in this state has been terminated or fired from a public position because of incompetence? Even the ones who are not classified. It rarely happens. So I think this is a pretext to allow enhanced power in the hands of the legislature and hands of the governor with no guarantee that there's going to be any real improvement within the system.
Yeah. Well, let's round it out, Chris, with the last proposed constitutional amendment, number 5. And we are also against this one. And it would raise the mandatory retirement age for Louisiana judges from 70 to 75.
Yeah, and I know that there are some people who have difference of opinions on this, Danielle. You and I have talked about this. There are 70-year-old judges who are very cogent, very competent, and are probably doing a very, very good job. But, it's our position that 70 is, a good age. And I think I don't think there's any reason to raise the retirement age to 75. 70 is appropriate. It opens the opportunity for younger lawyers to come in and run for judge, to have fresh impetus and fresh ideas within the judicial system. 70 is good. But one of the more fundamental reasons why we oppose this is that it looks as though this is an effort to preserve the longevity of judges many of whose seats are currently being challenged as racially unconstitutional gerrymanders, basically unconstitutional seats. And if, in fact, they are declared unconstitutional and illegal, then those seats would have to be vacated sooner rather than later. Whereas if the retirement age is raised, they could be serving in those illegal positions for 5 years longer, maybe even beyond that. So it looks like it may be a backdoor way to increase the political longevity of judges who are in seats that are probably going to be declared unconstitutional. So I don't agree with this for those two reasons, and that's why we're opposing Constitutional Amendment 5.
Yeah, and it was Paul Hurd who brought that to our attention. Of course, he knows the district maps of this state better than anyone, and I trust him implicitly. And I was telling you, Chris, if he was running and he was 90, if he was running for judge and he was 90, I would vote for him. So it's not, to me, it's not really a concern about age. It's just that this appears to be something that's working the system to continue the disenfranchisement of certain communities who are already disenfranchised by a racial gerrymandered district.
Absolutely. And lastly on this, Danielle, this was offered twice. This exact constitutional amendment has gone before the voters twice in the last number of years. I think one in 2014, maybe one a little earlier than that. Both times they have been, resoundingly rejected by the citizens of Louisiana, who apparently believe that age 70 is an appropriate age to retire from the judicial bench. I don't think there's any reason to change it. And to be honest with you, I think that if the word gets out, they know exactly what they're voting on, then I think they're going to reject that amendment as well. I wish, Danielle, that we had put on our promulgation of this, our position on this, exactly what the ballot language will actually say. You had it on there, and I inadvertently took it off, but we still believe that our analysis of these amendments is very sound, and there is enough information on there for people to be able to make an informed decision. But everything that we do, every decision we make, every recommendation that we do is always based upon what is in the best fiscal, economic, constitutional issues of Louisiana citizens. And I think that we've done that on these constitutional amendments, despite any disagreements that may exist. And we welcome any disagreements as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, thank you. If you have stuck with us all this time, we know today has been, we called it a marathon and not a sprint, quite a long episode, but we just appreciate you. We feel like you deserve to get all this information, and I just hope that it helps inform your choices going into this election season. I would encourage you, if you are not yet a supporter of the State of Freedom, please support us. We need your support to keep going, to keep the lights on. This work, as we often say, is not free for us to do. It has become a full-time job, and so we need your support and your help to keep going. So do that at join.freedomstate.us if you want to subscribe. And if you want to make a one-time donation, you can do that on freedomstate.us as well. We really appreciate it. And we appreciate you sharing it, helping us get out the voice of truth and what we believe to be, what we aim to be very integrous perspectives when it comes to what's happening in our state.
Yes, you are the wind beneath our sails. No compromises to special interests. Everything that we say is purely based on what's in your best interests. So if there's ever an outfit, either the State of Freedom or LeCag, that you feel like you can comfortably contribute to and donate to, it is ours, because we're uncompromising. Our loyalty is to you, and we need your support because we're fighting against some Goliaths out there who have an agenda that's very different from your own. So please prayerfully consider supporting us. We think you'll be very glad that you did.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Chris. Thanks for sticking with me. It's been a long little stretch here, but we made it through, and I think that people have a good sense of what is happening, or what options are coming before them in the next couple of weeks.
Always a pleasure, Danielle, and I know we shall be reconvening very, very soon.
Yep. All right, Chris. Well, God bless.
God bless you. Blanco Brothers has been in business in Louisiana for about 30 years now. I have personal experience with this company, and I know others who have as well. If you have a business or a home and you've got roofing, gutter, sheet metal issues at all, one number you need to know, and that's Blanco Brothers Construction. He will treat you right financially, and he will take very good care of you with regard to the quality of the service that he provides. I cannot recommend Blanco Brothers Construction more highly enough. Memorize the number, 225-226-4222. Blanco Brothers Construction, the very best in the business. Cabo Fuego is just unbelievable. Whether it's the flame-grilled carne asada or a signature mango margarita. I had one of those too. They're serving up a literal feast of freedom at Cabo Fuego. It's just extraordinary. I love the owners, Andres and Jose. They run such a great restaurant. The service is extraordinary. The atmosphere is great. So if you're in Pineville in the Alexandria area or passing through, or if you live there, go to Cabo Fuego and tell them the State of Freedom sent you.
Thanks for joining us today on the State of Freedom. Any follow-up actions, resources, and links to our sponsors will be in the show notes. All calls to action can be taken at lacag.org. That's LACAG.org.
To learn more about our work, become a monthly subscriber, supporter, or advertiser at freedomstate.us. The State of Freedom, the #1 conservative podcast.